Our intention is, forever. Um, but if
But what?
for whatever reason we were to separate, I don't need a prenup because I need to take her for half everything she got. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Bemuse. My name is Mishak.
And I'm Akiva.
And on this channel we talk about all things personal finance for young adults just like you and me. And in this episode we'll be talking about a topic that we've actually been considering, and that is prenups. As you guys know, Akiva and I got engaged back in October of 2019, and we're getting married later on this year.
Yep. So we've got to talking about, naturally, a bunch of money-related issues and things, and we just thought it would be cool to sit down and have a pretty unplanned, we really haven't discussed this to any length, we kind of just like, hey, should we consider a prenup? Let's not talk about it, save it for a video. So now we're here recording that video to share our thoughts on prenuptial agreements and whether we think that it's something that we're going to do. So, full disclosure, neither one of us are attorneys, though we know a little bit, about prenups from our very limited research. We're not attorneys, so this is definitely not legal advice. This is definitely, we're still trying to figure this out ourselves to a certain degree, but just based on the experience that I've had, with other couples, like clients who I've seen get walked through, the pros and cons of prenups as they're deciding to get married. As you guys know, I work with ultra high net worth clients, and so a lot of times when they're getting married to spouses who don't come from, means, it is a topic of conversation and of serious consideration. And funny enough, I've had two couples in the past year or so that have gotten married and considered a prenup and ultimately decided not to even do it. So I definitely feel like, it's definitely good to have that conversation, but don't feel like you're pressured into doing one, even if you are someone who has a lot of wealth or a lot of means. So first, let's clarify what a prenup even is, because I feel like there's a lot of preconceptions or myths about what a prenup actually is. So in a nutshell, a prenuptial agreement is a signed and notarized document that outlines what will happen to your assets as a married couple if you were to either get a divorce or even if you died, which is pretty interesting. And so sometimes a prenup can even supersede a will in some cases, which I think is pretty interesting. So it's not just in the case of divorce, it can also serve sometimes in the event that one of the spouses passes away.
Didn't know that, so that's something new.
Yeah. One really important thing that you should consider if you are considering getting a prenup is just know that you need to be 100% open and honest and accurate about the assets that you have, because a prenup can honestly sometimes be invalid if it comes out later that you've hidden assets, and your prenup has to disclose all of the assets that you have at that time, or else it's going to be rendered invalid. Like I said, if that information comes out later on that you were hiding a bank account here or whatever asset there. So just keep that in mind, is that if you're going to do it, you have got to be open and honest about everything.
So some things that honestly come up and you don't normally think about these things, but when people are getting divorced or separating, people tend to get really petty. So some reasons why someone might want to consider a prenup will be, for obvious reasons, financial. If you and that partner were to split, you don't necessarily want them to take half or more in some situations if children are involved and all of those different things. It's really to protect each person. Although it doesn't seem that way, it's generally to protect each party.
Especially if you're coming into like a blended family, this is like either a second marriage or you had children from a previous relationship, and things that you want to make sure stay within your bloodline and your family, and not necessarily with your spouse and maybe their kids that you might be joining together as a blended family. It's a really good thing to consider. Prenups aren't just also for the wealthy. Honestly, it really comes down to what you value. You might have a special piece that you inherited from your grandmother that you really cherish, and even though you might not have sold it, it might have either sentimental or it might even have big a lot of financial value to you, but you'd never sell it because it's that sentimental to you. Things like that you want to make sure are properly accounted for in the case of divorce or death.
Another big pro is, like I mentioned before, when people are separating and getting divorces, things oftentimes, and not necessarily always the people, but sometimes the people who are representing you, the attorneys, it's cutthroat. They're going for as much as they can based off of what they feel their client should get or should receive. So that's also something a pro is that you guys are sitting down when emotion typically is not being led by the decisions that you're making during that time. It was something that was pre-negotiated beforehand, that you all understand that this is what you are doing in the event that you separate.
And one other important thing to note is that, like I mentioned in the beginnings, a prenup can sometimes supersede a will, but that really, obviously, it still comes down to the court decision. The court has to, go through your will, go through your prenuptial agreement. The court is really the one making the decision as to which one stands and which one they're going to follow. And so it's definitely not foolproof. And so I would not depend solely on a prenuptial agreement to determine where your assets go in the event of your death. Still, highly, highly recommend doing a proper will.
And something else to add, like she mentioned, it's not just the wealthy that are, choosing to have a prenuptial agreement. This is actually becoming really popular, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, but it's becoming really popular amongst a lot of millennials, I believe. I read that in an article. People choose to get a prenup for multiple reasons. The reasons vary, but this is just kind of a sample or a taste of the pros that we believe come with choosing to have a prenuptial agreement. So a con for a prenup. Some people consider creating a prenup as a pre-plan for divorce. It leaves a bitter taste in most people's mouths because it's like, oh, so you're planning for us to split up 10 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever it is. And that might not be the case. It's just a protection thing. Another con is for most people, they're perceived as unromantic and can be a little bit disrespectful, especially for people who, may not be coming from wealth. It looks as if, oh, well, you think that I'm only with you for your money or yada, 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 and it can create some tension, especially if you're being influenced by family members. Hey, well, we got money, she don't, or we got money, he don't, so you need to make sure that you lock that down with the prenup. It's what, we all do. All of us here have prenups who are married in the family. So it's definitely something that can be perceived as a negative, unromantic to your partner. Another con, which I think is a big one, is it can be considered a lack of trust for your partner, that you believe that, hey, if something were to hit the fan, and you were to be furious with me, upset, that again, your emotion might take over, and I don't trust, that you're going to be rational when we're splitting up in that divorce, that you're going to try and gun for as much as you can and try and clean me out. Also, something to consider is the state that you live in. The laws are different from state to state.
Especially if you live in a community property state, things get a little dicey there.
Even like on infidelity. If your spouse cheats, then, in one state or the other, that could automatically, I believe if you have proof or something like that, that your spouse could get a lot of money out of you because they're not the ones who have done anything wrong, you did. So that's also something to consider, where you live, what the repercussions are if you don't have a prenup, or if the prenup is even valid if you break your marital contract by infidelity. So those are all things to consider.
Yeah, so in terms of just getting to us personally, some of the things that I would consider, or that we'd consider when doing a prenup, you guys have seen our balance sheets. You guys know what kind of assets we have, what kind of debts we have, the nature of our debts and things like that. So when it comes to purely a financial perspective, we are pretty much on relatively equal footing. One of us doesn't have significantly more assets or debts than the other. We are pretty equal when it comes to that. And any assets that we accumulate from this point on would really be a joint thing. So I honestly would not feel, slighted or that it would be unfair in any way if, real big if, divorce is not part of our vocabulary. First of all, let's throw that out there right now. Divorce is not an option for us. When we get married, we are staying married forever, till death do us part, that part. But in the event that even if that were to happen, anything that we've built, basically we've built together. So I would not feel, slighted or saying, it's unfair for us to have half and half. The thing I think about also is, what if one of us were to be a stay-at-home parent? That's something that I thought about as well, because if there's only one person bringing in income, basically one spouse now has kind of a limited income potential if they were to have to go back out into the workforce to support themselves after X amount of years or things like that. So it is something to consider, not thinking that that's what we would do. I don't necessarily see us being stay-at-home parents at this point, either one of us, but it's something that could come up in the future. So it's something that we could, that I've thought about. And so maybe it is fair for one person to get a little bit more assets, since basically like their income potential has now been diminished because they've been at home for X amount of time. Something else that I think about too is in terms of our debts. We're definitely going to be talking about this in much more detail going forward as to what our debt repayment plan will be as a married couple. But as it stands right now, we like to pay off our debt in the order of highest interest rate to lowest interest rate generally is how we like to do things. And right now, my loans have the higher interest rate. So if we were to combine our debt repayment strategy, more than likely we'd be trying to tackle my loans first. And so what happens when now we've paid off $30,000, $40,000 of my debt and we split? Like, that's not fair. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's basically had his assets, our combined assets have been going to paying toward my debt, and he's still stuck with all of his debt that we haven't touched. So that's also something that I think about, in terms of a reason why we might consider getting a prenup, is to see how we would handle that in that situation. Like I said, again, not thinking this is going to happen, but things that you really want to consider.
So personally, I don't know. Like, I think I've joked around in the past and I've said like, oh yeah, like, I need a prenup because if I ever come into some money and and you start acting funny and you start acting weird, like, I'm gonna need to keep my money.
He jokes all the time.
But
y'all.
yeah,
I don't even pay attention to this man.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah.
Like she said, our intention is, forever. But if for whatever reason we were to separate, I don't need a prenup because I need to take her for half everything she got.
Basically saying I'm going to be the more successful one when it comes to money. He's going to have to try to take my money.
And again, we did a video on this in the car about men making less money than women. And I mentioned in that video about industries that you're in and who your employer is. Like my employer and her employer, if we were to stay where we are, I will never make as much money as she does. The earning potential with her employer and in the industry that she's in, she's just going to make more money than I will. If I were to switch industries now, or maybe go for a private sector, maybe for a larger company, there's a lot more earning potential for myself. But, if things were to stay as they are now. So kind of going off of that, if things were to stay the way how they are, she's going to be making more money than I am. So, I got to take you for everything you got if something were to come up.
So definitely, if you're considering a prenup, talk to an attorney. Like I said, we're not attorneys. We're just sharing our little 2 cents and our views on the matter. So at the end of the day, we've decided basically like we're not going to get a prenup. That's not going to be something that we do. Like I said, we have every intention of staying married through the rest of our earthly lives. So yep, he's not getting rid of me anytime soon.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss when we post new content. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
I don't think you made it clear enough to the people that divorce is not an option.
Divorce is not an option.
Now it sounds coerced, like I'm forcing you to say it. I just feel like you've been playing devil's advocate too much in this video.
Influence.
Did that look like undue influence? You know what?
Welcome to our blue table talk. I'm sorry, blue chair talk. My name is Mishak. I'm your host, and this is my special guest, Akiva Thomas.
You know what?